Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
This episode today is hosted by the CSC literacy team. My name is Gordon Bell and I'm the Primary Literacy Specialist at Central South Consortium. Today I'm joined by...
I'm Jo Bailey. I teach at Pontprennau Primary School in Cardiff. I'm a Year 1 teacher. We currently have up to Year 5 pupils at Pontprennau, and I'm responsible for teaching and learning across the school and for new curriculum implementation.
I'm Dale Richards and I'm Deputy Head at Litchard Primary School in Bridgend. We're a school just off the M4 corridor with a mixed catchment. I am obviously Deputy Head. I've done quite a great deal in the school with literacy, well-being, and also helping to coordinate the delivery of the new curriculum.
And I am Josh Slade. I am a Year 2 teacher in Litchard as well, and part of the senior leadership team here.
Okay, welcome all, and thanks for joining us today. In this podcast, we're going to be focusing upon comparative judgment from the perspective of a couple of primary schools who have been involved this year as part of the CSC comparative judgment pilot. CSC funded 40 schools within the region to take part in the pilot to assess pupils' writing. In the autumn term, schools took part in comparative judgment assessments at Years 3 and Year 5, and this term they're working on assessments for Years 2, 4 and 6. I suppose before we go any further, it might be helpful to give a brief explanation of what comparative judgment is for anyone out there who's not familiar with it. I wonder if Josh, you could just, as I say, give a little bit of a brief introduction there about what comparative judgment is.
Okay, so comparative judgment is the process of judging a piece of work or a piece of extended writing by comparing it directly with another piece of extended writing, rather than, I guess, the more traditional style of judging a piece of writing by judging it against a set of outcome descriptors or level descriptors or rubrics. So for the pilot, we've used a tool called No More Marking, where we print scripts for the children to complete their extended writing on, submit the scripts onto the online system, and then the online system automatically generates combinations of pairs of scripts. So at any one time, you've got two pieces of extended writing to look at, and you just click the better piece of writing. So you just complete a holistic judgment and continually select the better piece of writing from the pairs of scripts that are generated for you. And what the system does then is, after a certain number of judgments or clicks have been completed, it can create a set of quantitative data for that piece of writing throughout a class or throughout a year group, with a certain level of confidence. So you have to complete X number of judgments for the system to be able to say, this is the set of quantitative data for that piece of writing.
Okay, thanks, Josh. That's great. So if I come to you, Jo, first, and maybe just ask you then, what interested you in a school in participating within this pilot with CSC, and perhaps what were you looking to gain from the process?
Yeah, I mean, there were two main reasons that we joined the pilot. The first was that after our inspection, writing was on our post-inspection action plan, our PAP. So because it was a whole school priority, we felt that this was something that we could really benefit from. Any data that we can get about writing and how to improve writing was going to be of benefit to us. And then also, as new curriculum lead, obviously, at the moment, we're still unsure of how we are going to assess in the new curriculum, and it was nice to get a feel, an idea of a different way of assessing, not just, as Josh has said, against, outcomes levels, because they may not be here for very much longer. So those were the two main things, and just to get some evidence really of where our writing was, and then tips to improve and builds upon good practice then.
Okay. Was that a similar motivation for you, Dale, at Litchard then?
Yeah, similar to what Jo said there, really. We were eager to sort of implement a system that helps us assess writing. Obviously, it's been a difficult year, and coming out of lockdown, one of the most impacted elements of children's literacy has been writing. So it's sort of fallen at the right time, really. of course, with the new curriculum, as Joe said, the old descriptors and the old levelling is on its way out, and yet we would still need to be comfortable in saying how well our writing is taught, and then how well the learners produce that writing across the school. So when we saw the comparative writing system and the kind of results we could get from it, it was naturally attractive to us, in that it provides something that we didn't have really.
Yeah, I think one of the attractions for us as a consortium, across the consortia for it, when we saw it first, was this idea of providing a writing age. And we were very interested in that, because obviously for a long time in schools we've had reading ages and been able to sort of like compare progress and track children using their reading ages, but we've never actually had something before that provided this idea of a writing age. And that was certainly, from our point of view, something that we thought it would help us gain a picture of the attainment of writing across the consortia, across the region for us, that would be really, really useful going forward. So having decided then to get involved, what was you have a task, as you said, Josh. There's a task that the children have to do, a writing task. How did you go about administering that task then within school, and what was the experience like for pupils and teachers?
Okay, so the system, normal marking, provided a stimulus for each writing task, and as part of the pilot, each year group has had to write a different genre. So, for example, year 3 were given a stimulus and they were asked, can you go ahead and write a story about this picture? Whereas year 5 had to create some sort of leaflet to try and sell, some sort of persuasive leaflet, I think, to sell a local park or something like that, sell the idea. So yeah, the stimulus comes from normal marking, and the writing that's completed is on the fairly cold end of the spectrum, what we would kind of dub a cold write. So really the only input the children had was what genre they were being expected to write. So you know, year 5 had one session to prepare them for you're writing a persuasive leaflet. Year 3 had one session to prepare them for you're writing a story. But aside from that, there was no kind of writer's journey, there was no build up, there was no story map for them to use. It was very much a cold write just to see what they could come up with. Yeah, so that's it in terms of administering the task. The experience, I think, generally speaking, it's been received quite positively, and teachers, you know, said that really it didn't differ in a huge way from lots of the things they would do in class, apart from, you know, cold writes would happen in class, but that was really the emphasis, is that this isn't really the end of the process. This is more just a reaction to a stimulus, and this is the genre you're writing, and we want to see what you can do. And the people seem to really, really enjoy.
Was that the same for you, Joe, in terms of, I'm particularly interested in like the pupils, because as you're saying, Josh, this is quite different, isn't it? Perhaps for our pupils who are used to a process that's leading them up to a piece of writing, to suddenly be given a stimulus, very little input, and then just being asked, now go ahead and write. I wonder what that was like for your pupils, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, as in any situation, you have some pupils that, you know, cope really well with it and they thrive on that challenge, don't you? And then there are a few that have a little panic and a little wobble. But I mean, we sold it to our younger ones, our year 2 ones, by saying that there was going to be a visitor in school and she wanted to see some writing, and this is the writing that you're going to do. The older ones, you know, and they thought, oh, good, it's for a purpose. You know, the older ones, it was more of the cold write, which they're used to. Yeah, I think as a teacher, in a way, it was quite hard not building up to that end product, that journey, because we're so used to, you know, skill, final product. But yeah, overall, it was a positive experience. The children, you know, and staff cope really well with it.
Now that's good to hear. So when the pupils have completed their written task, then what's the next part of the process then from you as a school and from teachers, Joe?
So for us, obviously, as we've mentioned before, the children complete their work on a specific, you know, paper that gets scanned into the system, and that's what we then use to assess the the pieces of writing. We decided for us, because it was a whole school priority, all teachers from nursery up to year 6 would be involved in all of the assessment sessions. So after a piece of writing has been completed, there's a sort of a 2-week window then where you wait until you then assess the writing. And this for us was really important because it was good for, say, foundation phase staff to see where Key Stage 2 are going and, you know, what we're building on as, you know, foundation phase team, where they will end up in Key Stage 2, but also vice versa for Key Stage 2 staff to see where their learners are coming from. So that was really important, you know, the stages of development and things like that. But it was nice. During the process, we used a staff meeting time to do the assessment with staff, and it was nice to have that professional dialogue. And when you're seeing 2 pieces of work on a screen that you're saying which is the best, you can see the things that you have taught. You know, you can see Alan Pete's sentence structures, for example, or, you know, your similes that you've worked on. So it was very much a team effort.
Was that similar for you at Litchard, Dale or Josh?
In a way, that's quite different. It sounds like a lovely idea. When we, when the children had completed their writing, it was myself and the 2 teachers from that year group who then went on to judge that piece. So, we're hoping, obviously, by the end of the year, when all of the year groups have completed their writing, all the teachers will have had a go. But yeah, potentially as a next step, that's quite a nice idea, actually. So, like you say, teachers see what's come before and teachers see what's coming after. But no, quite different the way we did it. It was 3 members of staff, myself and the 2 teachers for that year group.
I suppose though for you, Josh, that's useful though, because what you're doing there is before perhaps it goes out to all the staff, there are some staff members have already had an experience of the process, so kind of can look at any pros or cons of the judgment process. Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, it is a really useful tool, isn't it, to develop, as you're saying there, Joe, more than just that understanding of what particular year group is doing, but see it in the bigger picture of what that means for the writing development of pupils across the school and across the different age ranges. I mean, the process itself, I know when No More Marking fed back, they said that they had I think it was over 780 primary schools involved in this, mainly in England, some in Wales, particularly through CSC, and actually, but I think they've got international schools involved as well. And you end up with over 10,000 teachers involved in the process and over like 35,000 pieces of pupils' work, which does allow them then to make those judgments and standardise it, because they do have such a wide bank of evidence, don't they? Which is incredible. It's incredible, really, to be in that experience where you're doing something that so many other teachers are doing as well. I find that quite liberating to think, gosh, we're all working on the same thing here. I mean, you sound as if it was a very positive process, the whole thing, the comparative judgment process, Josh. But I wonder, sort of like, is there anything that you'd like to add in terms of the writing process, that judgment that you've done there?
Yeah, we definitely felt it was a very positive experience. In terms of the judging itself, we felt that the process really tapped into how our minds work just as people. So, for example, we chatted about it, and one of the teachers said, we're kind of doing what you would do if you saw a new movie in the cinema. You quite often come out and say, oh, it was good, but it wasn't as good as that one. And we just felt that it actually it made it very, very straightforward, I guess. And compared with, we kind of chatted about how long it would take us without this system to be able to rank 30 pieces of writing and pick out the strongest and pick out, trends within that piece of writing. It would take so long. Whereas the act of judging was really straightforward, and obviously there were periods where we had pairs of writing which were vastly different, and it was quite easy to say straight away, right, I think that's the better piece of writing. And then there were other occasions where there were 2 and you felt, no, I feel like I've got to read the whole thing in detail, and then even then it's quite a difficult decision. But we felt that the way of judging really worked, I guess, and you were getting a lot of value in return for a fairly straightforward process.
And similarly for you then, Joe?
Yeah, very similar. And I think when we did it as a team, the 2 pieces of work that were very similar, that's when our professional dialogue kind of took over, because you're right, Josh, some were really easy to do and others you really had to read, you really had to look at the punctuation, you really had to look at the spelling, and that was where we had our conversations about, well, why do you think this and why not? So it wasn't just an assessment opportunity, it was almost like a mini training session as well within the staff, which was useful.
Yeah, I think it's useful as well, isn't it? Because we're so used to judging pieces of writing based on a criteria that's given to us and looking for specifically things that just match that criteria. It's quite good that this is something that's much more holistic. Like you said, it's sort of like it's a response to the writing, and then it's digging deeper into, well, why do I think this one is better than the other one? Not that I'm looking at a sheet and saying, well, it's because it's got this thing that must make it a level 5, so the other one didn't have this. It's actually like that more holistic response. So you've been through the process. That sounds very positive. And then you do get quite a lot of information, don't you, actually, on a school level about the process and that's fed back to you. So I wonder if, Dale, you could just give us a little insight into some of the information that came back to you at school, the kind of information that you get on a school level.
Yeah, with a school, I say we've got quite a mixed catchment, so we focus quite a great deal on ability of children, gender, their background, sort of free school meals and all the rest of it. And we're 2-class entry as well, or 2-form entry. So what it's provided us with is the ability to sort of get a writing age from it, like you get a reading age normally. We're able to compare gender, free school meal children. Gives you a bit of a scale as well within your classroom. So, you can see top to bottom in your class, but also if you wanted to as well, you can see the whole year group then, which you wouldn't ordinarily do, I suppose, where you can have your top writers right down to the bottom, which then helps you, I suppose, when you pass up to the next year group, they can see top to bottom where the quality writers are and where the writers are that need support, I suppose, and also the ones in between, because we always know the best writers and we always know the poorest writers, but we kind of miss the in-betweeners sometimes, don't we, as well? So it gives you a plethora really of information that's quantitative, and then you can analyse really and use for future planning.
Yeah. I wonder, Joe or Josh, if you want to come in on this, I wonder if there were, because it does give that kind of pupil level data, whether there were any surprises in that data in terms of, were there children who you maybe always thought of as doing well and maybe didn't come out so well, or even vice versa? Or like you were saying, Dale, there, it's often easy to miss the kind of in-between children who can be kind of overlooked. And I wonder if any of those kind of, if there was any sort of standout amongst that and think, oh gosh, I didn't realise that's where they were. Joe, maybe if I come to you first.
Yeah, we did. We had a few that we thought, whoa, hang on, that's really high, and a few that we were quite surprised with. But again, we're using this as one piece of evidence to inform our assessments. This goes alongside our teacher assessments and other things as well. So this, as useful as it is, we wouldn't use just one way of assessing the children, totally. We would use a variety of different things. So it was nice to get some idea of, to consolidate what we thought, but also just to think, oh, hang on, like Dale said, we need to keep an eye on those ones because they're not quite where we thought they would be. And use it as a whole school thing.
I think it'll be very useful, actually, the top end of the school, for example, in terms of transition, because as a school at Litchard, and I know a lot of schools do, we do a writer's journey where we do a piece of work over 2 weeks, and by the end product, they redraft and they level 5, or as they used to be. And quite often we get children who we are saying are at that point in the journey, the school year journey as well. And when you send up to comprehensive school, I think sometimes comprehensive schools think, well, they're not at level 5 because when I gave them a code write, they couldn't write at level 5. So it's a good way as well of closing that assessment circle. So if you are assessing children in your head at the end of a year at a certain level, it gives you a parallel system which it will back you up, but also gives a cold assessment, which probably be how comprehensive school or secondaries may see those children coming in as well. So it's valuable in that respect, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to come in there, Josh, sorry.
Well, I just mirror what Joe and Dale have said, really. We found the same thing as what Joe had said about Pontprennau. There were definitely some surprises, and the first year group to complete the pilot were year 3, So there were children who were in my class last year. So instinctively looking at the list, there were a few you thought, wow, I wouldn't have expected that. And then there are others you thought, oh, I would have possibly expected a bit more. But yeah, there were always going to be, I guess, slight limitations to the data. So it led to quite some helpful discussion really on even the genre. So like year 3 were being asked to write a story, and there were some children that you looked at and thought, well, yeah, actually, but if perhaps they'd been asked to write this genre, I would have expected a little bit more, just because knowing the children and knowing, kind of how they work and kind of seeing over the course of a year how their minds work. So I guess there are always going to be like little things like that, little elements that qualify the data, I guess. But overall we loved that it was a set of quantitative data, and like I say, we just felt it would have, without this system, it would have been nigh on an impossibility to get this level of data with this level of confidence that we could draw on. But like Joe said, as part of a wider picture, writing is important, but writing isn't all, is it? So there are other things like that we would draw into an overall assessment.
Yeah, I think it's a good point there, isn't it? That it's a piece of the jigsaw, isn't it? Like it's building your knowledge and of pupil attainment, but it isn't. No one-off task is ever the be-all and end-all, is it really? Like, but it is a useful additional piece of information that sort of fits into that jigsaw. In terms of then school, I wonder how because you said, Joe, like all the school was involved in the process. I wonder if that's had an impact on how you as a school have responded to the findings of the comparative judgment that's been done so far. So
what we've done, and as you've mentioned before, we were particularly interested in the writing age, because we found in the past that a reading age, when you discuss things with parents and other stakeholders, if you say a child is this age chronologically but this age reading wise, it has more of an impact than saying they're on track or they're not on track. And we felt that a writing age, that was really useful to us as well. And also to see whether the reading age, the writing age, they're obviously matched to, or whether this was something we needed to focus on. So all of the data with the writing ages went into our school tracker, for evidence. Again, it was, towards our PAP, but also just as teacher assessments. But we also found that the follow-up webinars that No More Marking do were very, very useful, because they obviously looked at all of the year 3 data or all of the year 5 data and picked out the bits that were pertinent. So for example, sentence structure came up, basic sentence structure. And for us as a school where that's writing is a priority, we've worked really hard on our sentence structure. So it was nice to see that our results reflected that. So the webinars were extremely useful as staff training, as well as the actual assessment results.
Thanks, Joe. What about you, Josh, at Litchard? How have you used the information and gained from the process?
I think one of the most helpful things was being able to sit down with teachers and try and identify trends in the writing. So kind of similar to what Joe has just said, the No More Marking webinar did that overall anyway, and kind of picked up on the trend of sentence structure being an issue across the schools that were submitting in the consortium. But yeah, I think it was being able to have that dialogue together and really try to pin down, okay, this is how we feel about this piece of writing, but why? Like, what is it about this piece of writing that's making us feel positive? This is a strong piece of writing, or what is it about this piece of writing that we're thinking is holding it back? And it's really being able to inform teaching, I think, from that point of view. And strengths as well, to be able to look at a piece of writing and think, actually, as a cohort or as a class, look at what they've got, look at high frequency words, or look at how they're using their blends and their letter teams to build words. So yeah, I think that's been the main thing, I think, from a teaching point of view that we've gained, is that it's helped us to identify trends.
Thanks, Josh. As I said at the beginning, I mean, you were part of the pilot that CSC funded, and it sounds like it's been a really positive experience for you. I wonder, Dale, obviously being part of school leadership at Litchard, whether you've had any thoughts about plans going forward with using this comparative judgment process at all?
Yeah, myself and Josh had a chat with the head about the system, and we obviously thought about carrying on with it, because it's proved very useful. for all staff involved, but also strategically as a school to monitor writing going forward. And then we sort of looked at, would we do it once a year or twice a year? We sort of came to the conclusion we probably do it twice a year. Then we sort of talked about, would it be mixed genres? And we sort of came to the conclusion that probably the best way to assess a writer is to use one type, which would be story for us, but maybe even to focus on potentially the same story across the school. So, you know, you see the same child, I don't know, writing about the three bears in reception, and then by the time they go to year 6, they're still writing about the three bears. We will generally see.
Yeah. And other things as well, Dale, along the way. Right. I know they will have other opportunities.
You know, this you actually see when they write then, or they know the story. When we discuss them, when you sort of teach writing, you're not really teaching them to create a story. You're teaching children to retell a story as best you can. So, you know, we need a system that provides us with consistency, but also compares children equally as well. And that's why we sort of honed in on different genres or singular genre, and then maybe even the same story right throughout.
What about Pontprennau, Joe? Have you had any thoughts about going forward with this process?
Well, because we're only part of the pilot, obviously we've got this year's data, as it were. It would be nice, I think, to carry on and be able to compare and see progress of the children with their writing. At the moment, obviously, we're still waiting for years 1 and 4 to complete the process. Whether, you know, depending on how my year 1s cope in that process, it might be that we only do it for, say, you know, end of progression steps. So it might just be, you know, the year 1, year 4, maybe year 6. I don't know. It depends. But it would be, it's a simple system that doesn't take up too much time, but does give you a lot of data. So, you know, it would be beneficial, I think, to continue for a little while. And like I say, be able to look at the progress and to look, as we've said before, about trends, maybe cohort trends or genre trends that are performing better than others and things like that.
Okay, thanks. When you introduced yourselves, I noticed, Joe and Dale, you both introduced yourselves as having responsibility within your school, looking at the new curriculum. And I just wonder, because everything is like is within that framework at the moment, isn't it? I wonder if there's anything about this process that you think is useful in terms of supporting schools developing the LLC AOLE within that new curriculum for Wales. I don't know if you've had a chance to think about that, Joe.
We found that the actual, you know, the teaching staff, the discussion that we were having between ourselves about pupils' work was invaluable. So it was nice from a new curriculum point of view to sort of start to see a way that we would assess pupils in a different way. But also it was nice to know that from the webinars and from trends that have been picked up, it was nice to know that we were on track as a school, that the actual, you know, the experiences that we're giving our children are really good, because, you know, we are making progress and our results were really positive. It would be interesting to see now how maybe a kind of normal marking system could come in for other areas of learning in some way. But yeah, it was a good start, I think, to thinking about assessment as a whole.
Okay, I don't know if Dale or Josh, if you've had any ideas. Litchard, Dale, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, what there makes a lot of sense, really. And of course, with the new curriculum as it is, and you're looking at you know, where they are in that stage of their development, and yet there's no real assessment system. At least it gives you comfort in your classroom, in your school, where your writers are. They're actually somewhere on in the system, really, and you know, from there, then you can amend the way you teach or amend your writer's journey then to impact those children. You know, it would be very difficult to move forward as a school that considers itself at least adequate or good in writing. Adequate's the wrong word.
Yeah, better than that.
But you know, if you say you're a good school and your writers are where they should be for their age, it does give you something to hang your hat on, I think, really, and justify where you think you're at. And for a class teacher, where your individual children are right across your classroom, really. And I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, and we've been, just yesterday we were talking to our head about how, obviously with outcomes and levels going, we really want, moving forward, we really want our teachers to be able to assess the children in their class, but for any judgment to be an informed judgment. And we really value this comparative judgment as part of that bigger picture that Joe spoke about earlier. So whereas in the past you would have on your data sheet language literacy communication outcome 5A or mathematical development outcome 4B, obviously that'll all be a thing of the past, but we still need our judgments, we still need our assessments of children to be informed. So like you say, we've always had, well not always, but for a long time we've been able to say that a child has a reading age. So now to build a more complete picture, we can say that they've got a writing age as well. So we think it's such a valuable tool just to inform a teacher's assessment and inform a teacher's judgment of where a child is.
I think as well, it was about training each other, because like I said, we did it as a school. So it was about, our year 5 teachers almost training our foundation phase teachers to say, look, this is the expected outcome at year 5. So, if you do end up moving from year 1 to year 6 next year, which could be a possibility, this is the expectation. So it was almost used as a kind of moderation exercise, training exercise as well.
Yeah, but based on all the old moderation and meeting up with the schools, and you got the paper compared things, what struck me with the whole system of it was I sat down, the data came on the screen, and it was very instinctual, I suppose, and lots of gut feeling, but you could feel it. He was sort of pushing all these pieces of work and creating like a sifting system purely based on your instinct as a teacher and your experiences, but yet came out with very sensible and valuable data. So it was a really interesting experience.
Okay, thank you all for your contributions there. It was a really interesting discussion. Particularly thank you because as people are listening to this, they may well hear children in the background, doors knocking, opening, etc. Because you're all taking part in this while in your school. So really appreciate that within that working environment. And let's face it, isn't it lovely to have children in the background now when we've spent so long on Zoom without them around us. So thank you very much for your contributions today. I think it was really useful, informed discussion. And I look forward to seeing you all again and working with you in the future. Thanks ever so much.
Diolch am wrando ar y benod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website, and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.